Welcome to this tutorial. I'll be going through editing this image in which I will demonstrate how you can do color correction underwater. Bear in mind that this image was taken in RAW, so this tutorial is made for those who have a camera that can shoot RAW underwater. More precisely, this photo was taken with Sony a7R III. And as you can see here on the right side, these are the settings that I used to take this photo. It was taken more or less around 5 p.m. So there was quite poor light. However, the reason why I took this image at this late during the day is because you get this sort of beams of light that you don't see in the raw file because I saw it with my own eyes. So I'll be trying to pull that off during the edit. Um, and I really like that sort of effect when taking those photos that late. For that reason, I have to increase ISO, as you can see here, and I have to shoot with a relatively low shutter speed. This is I don't put it all the way to 60s of a second because there's a lot of fish around, and I want to make sure that some of those fish stay sharp. Even though obviously the main subject of the image is the reef, as you can see here, some brain coral, another type of coral here on the back. So I want to make emphasis in that and the lights of rays that you will see later on. The result that we're going for in this tutorial, it's the following. And even though it might not look exactly the same, in fact, I think during the tutorial I'll try to make it look better than this. And I'll be showing you all the settings that we'll be adjusting in the description so you can try it yourself. And well, let's get to it. This image itself, there's something particular about photos underwater. If you're new to taking photos underwater, you'll know that regardless of the settings that you use in your cameras, the predominant colors that you'll see are going to be blue, green, and also that sort of middle range between blue and green, which is a color called cyan. And if you're familiar with Lightroom, it's called aqua. So there's a lot of cyan within underwater images. And however, if you understand the spectrum between certain colors, you'll be able to adjust that to reveal other colors that were there or that you saw with your own eyes, but the camera cannot see because of the distance between the subject and light. When we take photos outside of the water, we don't deal so much with that. But underwater, it is important that you understand how you can turn green into other colors and obviously blue as well. One of the things that I really like to adjust first when it comes to underwater images is heading to the curves. And instead of adjusting just light, as you see in the first menu, I like to go to red. And as you can see, the opposite color of red is green, or it's like that sort of bluish turquoise that it is obviously predominant in this image. So what I would want is within the highlights of this color, which is not really seen, I will try to push that up within the shadows, and you'll see how slowly you start to bring up that sort of orange tone that brain coral has underwater that is not exactly green. So that's something that we're adjusting to make it look a little bit more neutral. On the other hand, you also have green itself, and the opposite of green will be magenta. So there is certain color within this green of the corals that you can bring up and make it look a little bit more brownish. When I edit photos underwater, I like to bring that up. I like to illustrate certain colors that you're able to see from up close underwater, but you're not able to bring that up with a camera, or at least most raw files will come green, so you'll have to adjust this yourself. And the best way I do that is by bringing those colors a little bit up. And if I go to full shadows, I can even make it, you can create that red filter that people buy that you can put in front of your camera. We can do this in post, so that's why we play with curves. And On the other hand, the blue has contrast with yellow, and this is something that you can also play with to make the image a little bit more corrected, like so. So if we go back to the beginning, this is what it was, and this is what it's starting to look now. It looks much better. There's obviously a few other things that I want to bring up. You see how there's still some sort of haze within the blues because the light is being reflected very weird underwater. This is something that we can adjust in the basic settings of the Lightroom module. And if we go to exposure to perhaps add that a little bit so that the coral starts to see more obvious, and I see how uh, there's a really nice tool that Lightroom has, which is called the haze. And with photos underwater, what happens a lot is that there's particles that sit between the lens and subjects. And this could be microorganisms like plankton, certain types of plastic, microplastic, all kind of things that are underwater. This create a little bit of a fuzz or haze between the objects in the image. And to correct that in Lightroom, you can just play with the haze, and that will give it a more contrasty tone, as you can see, and it removes that sort of milky water that you see that's showing up within the raw file. So if we go back, you see the difference, and then once again we push it up and it starts to look better. There's other things that I think are very important. You see how the shadows of the coral are a bit too dark. In fact, I think there's a lot of information here that we can pull it up, and by that we can play with the blacks. You can see how that adjusts that a little bit. We don't want to go too far because it starts to look fake, and in my images I like to make it look as neutral as possible, not crazy effects or things like that. We can also adjust the shadows. Shadows will just adjust uh, the the darkness between subjects, and perhaps I want to bring more light, so I'll adjust the whites a little bit. As for highlights, I think the highlights are quite okay the way it was. I'll just make it slightly lower. And yeah, starting to look pretty good. We go back and look what it was before and now what it starts to look now. There's um, an extra step that I take within color correcting images underwater, and that would be playing with the hue, saturation, and luminance. It is said that when you edit images, you're not supposed to adjust saturation of colors. I remember when I was learning photography, and a lot of photographers will tell me that when you adjust the saturation of an image, you're making the image fake. However, when it comes to underwater, and I'm pretty sure the people that were saying that didn't quite take photos underwater, uh, there's a specific saturation that I like to remove, and that's the one from aqua. Remember in the beginning I said that there is a lot of cyan in underwater. Um, in order to make the photos a bit more presentable to my liking, or that I see that people like as well, is by removing the aqua saturation of the image. So if I decrease that, you not only start to see the water becoming a little bit more clear, you also start to bring up the red that you need within the coral. So you see the coral in the beginning, it's super green, and there's a lot of colors here that are just being um, destroyed by the green, or you're unable to see them. You can bring that up by adjusting the cyan as well. Much better. Um, in regards to the beams, I think you start to see it already, but it's still not to my liking. In the raw, you can hardly see that, but as we progress with adjusting the water tones and the blue tones, we start to bring those beams of light that I saw when I took this image. Another important aspect that I like to adjust is the luminance of colors. If you see here blue, for example, see how I make that image much darker or much lighter. Depending on how shallow or deep you are taking a certain photo, you might want to adjust the luminance either to increase it, but in this case, if you increase it, I think it starts to look a bit too fake to my liking. You can also decrease it, and it also will remove that haziness that I talked about in the beginning, but it would also start to bring more details within the light, or at least the light that is reflected from the sun at this point of the day. Um, Another adjustments I'm gonna do is improve the saturation of the purple. That way the coral won't look too fake. And then I can also adjust this purplishness or reddishness that's over here by adjusting these values. Yeah, I think the coral is looking much better. Let's see what else you can adjust. With the luminance, you can also fix certain things within the green. A very big mistake that I see when people ask me when editing with the Hue SL, so HSL, would be that they see an image that they're editing and they want to adjust. For example, this looks like sort of orange and it also looks like yellow. You won't adjust it with yellow because the initial value of this image was green, mostly green and cyan. So if you want to adjust these parts of the image, you will have to do that within the blue and the aqua areas. See how that adjusts? If I go to yellow, there's hardly any yellow in the image when you took it. So if you adjust yellow, it doesn't do that much. I think the only part where there's yellow in this image is the fish. So if we go to the fish here and try to adjust yellow, that would adjust that luminance within the tail. But if you want to adjust these values, those values are within blue and aqua. Could also be green, but green is also much related with yellow instead of cyan. So I personally advise you to use mostly blue or aqua to adjust those values. It's looking quite nice. Let's see. Um, in terms of curves, I like to do the standard, bring up a little bit more the highlights and adjust the shadows a little bit to make it look more neutral, something like that. Another thing that in the past it used to be pretty hard actually to adjust these things, but the new updates of Lightroom really make it much easier to use. For example, you can create masks that are very smart, and in this case, I want to adjust the colors within the coral a bit further. And for me to do that, I would have to, well, there's many ways where you can do this. You can either select a brush, and in this case, you can mask the areas that you want to adjust. But I find it very interesting how you can use, for example, sky, even though there's no sky here unless the water is sky. But if this would be an image outside of the water, I'm pretty sure an AI will think that this is sky. So if I select sky right now, it immediately selects the background of my image, including the fish, which is something that at least these areas will be really difficult to do. Especially I would used to do them in Photoshop back in the day, but now this makes it really interesting. So instead of me adjusting the background, I said I want to adjust the coral, so I can just invert the mask, and that creates a very decent mask that I can use to edit the coral. So now let's remove the overlay so we don't see it. And now I want to add a little bit more sort of orange tone to make it look more realistic, less green, and more corrected, like so. I think that makes it look way better. Yes, it does. Um, last but not least, there this is personal. You can adjust this to your liking, but I do like to bring a lot of that color that is absent within underwater images, which is that reddish, brownish sort of color. By doing so, you can add a little bit further um, extra reddish. So for example, if you go here in the shadows, and the shadows, I know that in this image the shadows is the coral. So and the fish here, if I want to remove that green a bit further, I can adjust this part, and in the luminance I want to bring a little bit down because it feels like it's too much light that it's not actually there. So I will make it slightly reddish, and I will decrease the luminance like so. And I want to bring more correction to the background. By doing that, I can create a new mask. Select the sky, and I'll make this slightly darker, like so. All right, so this is a nice, easy way to adjust the image that you've done underwater. Um, Obviously, the value of blue, which is very, very personal. I've seen lots of very good photographers out there that like to adjust this to make it more dreamy by making it more violet instead of blue, which does create a nice aesthetic to it. But the way that I do photography is I like to keep it as neutral as possible. So obviously there will always be blue underwater because that is the way that light is presented to our eyes from distance. And the transparent water does become bluer with distance, and I think that's very nice. If you would want to, however, adjust that, you will have to go to the hue, and you can go to the blue and make it whatever tone suits to your liking. There's some photographers that like it, make it want to make it look more cyan, so you can increase that cyan within the blue or make it more violet. I personally like to keep it as neutral as possible. I don't quite adjust hues as much, but you can do so if you like. And let's see, for aqua, which is the actual cyan, I will make it slightly bluer so that it looks more neutral to my liking. Well, that's it, guys. I hope you've learned something. I'm gonna try to be better at presenting things so that this will be more concise tutorial as opposed to me going um, too in depth into certain values. But I think it brings a lot of good information for you to learn how to adjust images. Another thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a preset of what I've done here. I'm gonna call it underwater color correction tutorial, and I'll put a link in the description where you can download this and you can adjust images to make it look like so. For example, I can grab another image, and this has been unedited, so if I select the preset that we used just now, it makes it look much better, and it could be a great start of the workflow that you'll be doing for any other image. If you really like what you've seen, I will be so thankful if you can like and subscribe this video so that more people can learn and encourage me to continue making this type of tutorials. I wish you a good day. Cheers.